Lieutenant Sarah Carter gripped the worn leather strap of her duffel bag, the coarse fabric pressing into her palm as she stepped onto the ramp of the military transport plane. The low hum of the engines vibrated through the metal floor, a steady, almost hypnotic pulse that resonated with the anxiety coiling in her stomach. Around her, the other soldiers moved with practiced efficiency, their boots scuffing against the metal and canvas, duffels bouncing against their hips, rifles slung over shoulders. Some laughed quietly, others exchanged tactical briefings, but most avoided eye contact, lost in their private mental preparations. Sarah's heart pounded in rhythm with the engines, a drumbeat of anticipation and dread. This was her first overseas deployment. She had spent years at West Point, absorbing lessons about tactics, strategy, and resilience, but none of it could truly prepare her for what awaited in a war-torn region thousands of miles from home. She had studied maps, memorized protocols for combat medical procedures, and even run simulations in virtual war zones, but none of it captured the chaos of real gunfire or the weight of responsibility when a life hung in the balance. Her uniform was crisp, her boots polished, yet she felt exposed, as if the layers of fabric couldn't protect her from the storm of fear and uncertainty building inside. A fellow soldier, a seasoned sergeant named Rodriguez, glanced at her and gave a half-smile that was equal parts reassurance and warning. "Ready, Lieutenant?" he asked. She nodded, though her throat felt dry. "As ready as I'll ever be." The plane's interior smelled of engine oil and recycled air. Rows of seats were lined with soldiers, most of them slouched or adjusting their gear. Some had personal mementos tucked into pockets, photographs, letters from loved ones, small trinkets from home. Sarah thought about her family, tucked away in their quiet suburban home, and the stark contrast between their world and the one she was about to enter. She thought of her younger brother, Michael, who had begged her to reconsider joining the Army. He had called her brave, maybe too brave, and Sarah smiled at the memory. He didn't fully understand, but courage had always been her compass. As the plane's wheels lifted off the tarmac, she felt the familiar pull of gravity shift, the cabin tilting as they ascended through a thin veil of clouds. Through the small, oval windows, the landscape blurred from manicured fields to sprawling wilderness, and to the distant cityscapes that hinted at the conflict ahead. She kept her gaze fixed on the horizon, trying to steady the fluttering in her chest. The training had drilled into her the need for calm focus under pressure, and now she repeated the mantras in her mind like a lifeline. Assess, act, protect, survive. A sudden jolt from turbulence made her grip tighten, and she realized her body had been holding in tension she hadn't even noticed. She let out a slow breath, consciously relaxing her shoulders. Around her, soldiers whispered quiet reassurances to themselves, checked weapons, or scribbled in small notebooks. Sarah didn't have much to write yet. She was cataloging her thoughts, trying to make sense of the enormity of what she was about to face. Her commanding officer, Captain Lewis, entered the cabin, moving with a brisk efficiency that made everyone else shrink slightly into their seats. He stopped near the center, voice calm but authoritative. "Listen up," he said. "We are entering a region with heavy insurgent activity. Civilians will be caught in the middle. Your priority is life preservation, yours and others. Stay sharp, stay aware, and remember your training. This isn't a drill." The words struck Sarah with a cold reality. This wasn't an exercise. There would be no simulations, no safety nets. Her thoughts drifted to the stories she had heard from returning soldiers, the ambushes, the close calls, the unpredictability of a sniper's shot. Her stomach tightened at the thought. She had imagined war in textbooks and in virtual simulations, but the real thing was something she couldn't rehearse. And yet, within that fear, there was a spark of determination. She didn't want to be a statistic or someone who faltered. She wanted to be someone who could make a difference, who could hold steady when lives depended on her actions. As the plane cruised at altitude, the cabin lights dimmed slightly, leaving the soldiers in a muted glow. Some closed their eyes, resting or praying. Sarah leaned back, letting the hum of the engines lull her into a meditative state. She reviewed her kit: first aid supplies, bandages, emergency tourniquets, trauma shears. She ran through the procedures in her mind, step by step. Every movement had to be precise. Hesitation could cost lives. Rodriguez, noticing her meticulous review, leaned over. "You're over-preparing," he said with a half-smile, though his eyes held respect. "But that's okay. Better to be over than under when the bullets start flying." Sarah nodded, acknowledging the truth in his words. It was that mix of fear and preparation that kept soldiers alive, and she embraced it. Hours passed in a tense, quiet rhythm. The plane flew over mountains, deserts, and rivers, each landscape a silent warning of the unpredictable challenges below. Sarah felt a strange combination of dread and exhilaration. She was about to step into danger, but she was also about to step into her purpose. She thought of her training, her mentors, the countless hours of preparation that had brought her here, and she realized, despite the fear, that she was ready not just to survive, but to prove herself. As the plane began its descent, the first signs of the conflict zone came into view. Smoke plumes rose in the distance, villages dotted the landscape, and the faint sounds of distant artillery rattled the horizon. Sarah's stomach twisted, adrenaline spiking, yet her hands were steady. She felt the weight of responsibility settle over her shoulders. She wasn't just carrying medical supplies. She was carrying the potential to save lives, to make choices that could alter the course of someone's fate. The plane touched down with a jarring thud, metal screeching against the runway. Soldiers sprang into action, securing equipment and preparing to disembark. Sarah felt the rush of adrenaline hit fully, sharpening her senses. Dust swirled in the warm, arid air as she stepped onto the tarmac, boots sinking slightly into the gritty surface. The noise, heat, and smell were overwhelming, yet invigorating. This was the reality of deployment. The real battlefield awaited, unpredictable and unforgiving. She glanced at her fellow soldiers. Some were calm, others tense, their faces masks of determination and fear. Sarah took a deep breath, allowing the gravity of the moment to anchor her. She was no longer in the safety of a classroom or training ground. Every decision, every action, every moment could mean the difference between life and death. But within her, a steadfast resolve burned. She wasn't here to falter. She was here to survive, to serve, and to prove that courage wasn't defined by rank or experience, but by heart. As the convoy trucks rumbled toward the forward operating base, Sarah gazed out across the rugged terrain, aware that her first patrol would test everything she had learned. The wind whipped dust into her face, stinging her eyes, yet she didn't flinch. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and perhaps death itself, but also the opportunity to make a difference. Sarah tightened her grip on the duffel bag one last time and whispered to herself, "This is my moment. I'm ready." The convoy rumbled along a dirt road, trucks bouncing over uneven terrain, dust swirling in thick clouds around the wheels. Lieutenant Sarah Carter held tightly to the edge of her seat in the rear truck, eyes scanning the horizon for movement. Every shadow, every glint of light on metal, every flutter of fabric made her pulse quicken. Her training reminded her to stay alert, but nothing could fully replicate the tense, unpredictable reality of the field. Each moment was a test of focus, instinct, and nerve. The village they were approaching appeared deceptively calm. Low, sun-bleached buildings lined the narrow streets, laundry fluttering in the warm wind, goats meandering lazily between houses. Children's laughter echoed faintly, a stark contrast to the grim purpose of the soldiers moving through their midst. Sarah's stomach tightened. This was where danger hid in plain sight. One wrong move, one misstep, and an ambush could erupt without warning. She glanced at her squadmates, their faces taut with concentration. Some scanned rooftops, others checked alleys, rifles ready. Rodriguez shot her a quick nod, a silent reminder to stay vigilant. As the truck slowed near the center of the village, Sarah's attention was drawn to a small commotion in a narrow alleyway. A boy, no older than 8 or 9, had stumbled into debris, his leg twisted unnaturally beneath him. Blood seeped through the dust, mixing with the dirt on his skin. A woman shouted in a language Sarah didn't understand, her hands grasping at the child in panic. Without thinking, Sarah unbuckled her harness and moved quickly, weaving through the villagers and her own squad, ignoring shouts from Rodriguez to stay in the truck. Her hands trembled slightly as she knelt beside the boy. The sight of the torn cloth and the deep cut made her heart pound. She forced herself to breathe evenly, reviewing the steps she had drilled hundreds of times. "I've got you," she whispered, her voice steady even as adrenaline surged. Carefully, she examined the wound, noting the severity of the bleeding. She tore strips of cloth from her field kit, applying pressure while instructing the woman to hold the boy still. Each motion had to be precise. Hesitation could mean death. Around her, tension crackled. The squad formed a loose perimeter, rifles scanning rooftops and alleyways, their eyes darting nervously for movement. Sarah could feel the danger pressing close, a silent reminder that even as she saved this child, enemies might be watching from hidden positions. The thought made her chest tighten, but she didn't let it show. Her hands moved methodically, applying a makeshift tourniquet and dressing the wound as best she could. "You're going to be okay," she repeated, hoping to calm both the boy and herself. A sudden clatter drew her attention. A crate overturned somewhere down the street, startling a group of women who screamed and scattered. Sarah froze for a split second, every instinct screaming danger, before Rodriguez barked a command, signaling the squad to tighten their perimeter. Her pulse raced as her mind cataloged possibilities: sniper fire, an ambush, hidden explosives. But the boy remained her priority. She locked eyes with him, whispering encouragement, while silently praying she had bought enough time to stabilize him. The commanding officer, Captain Lewis, approached, eyes scanning the scene with the sharp precision of someone accustomed to assessing danger in seconds. He noticed Sarah crouched over the boy, hands steady despite the chaos. "Lieutenant Carter," he said, voice carrying over the dust and distant chatter. "Get back to the truck." "That's an order." Sarah shook her head, barely glancing up. "He needs me," she said firmly. Lewis hesitated, recognizing the determination in her eyes. He knew her training, knew her capability, but sending a medic into the open risked lives. Time seemed to stretch. The boy whimpered as Sarah adjusted the dressing, checking for pulses and ensuring circulation wasn't cut off. Sweat ran down her forehead, mixing with dust and grime, but she ignored it. Every sound, the scrape of boots on stone, the murmur of villagers, the distant clatter of machinery, kept her on high alert. Somewhere, hidden, the sniper might be observing, waiting, testing. She couldn't know, but instinct told her danger was near. She moved carefully, hands precise, breath steady. Finally, she stabilized the boy enough to be moved. 2 soldiers carefully lifted him, guided by Sarah, toward the truck. Relief surged briefly before tension returned. Each step outside her immediate control felt like a gamble. When he was safely inside, she climbed in last, scanning the rooftops one final time. Her eyes caught a glint of metal high above the alley, a reflection of sunlight off a scope. She froze, heart hammering. Could it be the sniper she had been warned about? The thought chilled her. Rodriguez noticed the hesitation. "You see something?" he asked quietly. Sarah shook her head subtly, but her mind raced. She didn't want to alarm the others prematurely, yet her instincts screamed that they were being watched. Captain Lewis, sensing the unease, gestured for the convoy to move on, keeping a tighter formation. Dust rose in their wake, swallowing the village behind them, but Sarah's gaze lingered. That flash of metal wasn't just luck. Someone was tracking her. As they drove toward the forward operating base, Sarah replayed every moment in her mind. The boy's terrified eyes, the woman's frantic pleas, the sudden glint of metal. Each memory burned vividly. She realized that in war, even acts of kindness carried immense risk. Yet she felt an unexpected surge of confidence. She had stepped forward, defying orders to save a life, and she had succeeded. It was a small victory, but in a world governed by uncertainty, it mattered profoundly. At the base, the medics greeted her with quiet acknowledgement. Sarah moved quickly, replenishing supplies and reviewing procedures, but her thoughts remained on the village, on the boy, and on the unseen eyes that had followed her every move. That sniper's presence transformed fear into focus, a reminder that vigilance and courage were inseparable. She had survived her first true encounter, not just with the enemy, but with the unpredictable cruelty of war. Captain Lewis approached. Again, voice low but firm. "Carter, I've seen rookies freeze or panic in situations like that. You didn't. You acted. That's why you're still here." Sarah nodded, a mixture of pride and apprehension swirling within her. She knew this was only the beginning. The battlefield would test her more than any training, more than any simulation, and certainly more than any expectation she had carried from home. As night fell over the base, Sarah sat on the edge of her cot, cleaning and organizing her kit. The dust of the day still clung to her uniform, but she didn't mind. She reflected on the courage required, not just hers, but the courage of civilians, of fellow soldiers, and even of the boy she had saved. Each life she touched carried weight, responsibility, and consequence. And somewhere beyond the walls of the base, hidden in shadows, the sniper observed. His earlier inquiry echoed in her mind. Is she still alive? Sarah understood, in a deep, visceral way, that this was not just a question, it was a challenge. A test of endurance, of courage, of willpower. She had survived today, but tomorrow promised new dangers, new choices, and new opportunities to prove that she belonged. Sarah closed her eyes briefly, letting exhaustion wash over her, but her resolve remained unshaken. This was the crucible of her first encounter, and she had emerged alive, not just because of training, but because of her heart, her instinct, and her refusal to step back in the face of need. She was no longer just a lieutenant, no longer just a medic. She was a survivor, and already she felt the stirrings of something greater, a purpose that would define her in the days to come. The sun was barely rising over the jagged horizon as Lieutenant Sarah Carter climbed into the lead truck of the morning convoy. The air was dry and brittle, carrying the scent of dust, burned fuel, and the faint metallic tong of distant conflict. Sarah's hands gripped the edge of the seat, knuckles pale under the strain, eyes scanning every crevice of the rocky landscape. Today's mission was simple on paper, a routine supply run to a nearby village. In practice, nothing was ever simple. Danger lurked in the unseen. A hidden sniper, a buried explosive, an ambush around the next corner. Rodriguez rode beside her, calm yet vigilant. "Morning, Lieutenant." Eyes sharp. "You know the drill," he murmured, adjusting his helmet and checking the weapon strapped across his chest. Sarah nodded, throat tight but jaw set. She repeated the mental checklist she had drilled countless times: situational awareness, emergency. Extraction points, medical supplies within reach, squad positions. The hum of the engine beneath them was steady, almost comforting, yet every vibration carried the potential for violence. The convoy moved in tight formation, each vehicle spaced, carefully to minimize vulnerability. Sarah's eyes flicked constantly. Rooftops, alleyways, distant ridges. She noted every detail, the tilt of a roof, the slight movement of laundry, even the way the wind shifted dust across the terrain. A single wrong movement could be fatal. Her pulse quickened with each mile. Even the mundane details carried weight. This was a world where vigilance was not optional. It was survival. The first sign came subtly. A piece of debris, an overturned crate, tumbled from the side of the road. One of the younger soldiers swore softly, glancing around nervously. Sarah's instincts snapped into high alert. She tightened her grip on the side of her seat, eyes scanning for movement. She knew from experience and from the stories that ambushes often began with seemingly small anomalies. A child darting across the road, a stray goat, a flicker of cloth on a rooftop. All of it could be a distraction. Then came the sound, a sharp, echoing crack, like a whip slicing the air. The truck in front jerked violently, a cloud of dust and debris erupting as bullets struck metal. Explosions followed, low and deafening, sending tremors through the ground beneath them. Sarah's stomach lurched. "Ambush! Ambush!" "Rodriguez!" shouted, voice carrying over the chaos. Soldiers dove for cover, rifles snapping into position. Instincts and training collided. Sarah's heart pounded as she unbuckled and scrambled to the open hatch, scanning the scene with rapid, precise movements. Smoke coiled through the streets like living shadows, obscuring the enemy's positions. A fellow soldier screamed, clutching. His leg as shrapnel tore through his uniform. Without hesitation, Sarah leaped forward, dragging him toward cover. Every movement was a calculated risk, a dance on the knife's edge between life and death. The screams, the gunfire, the whistling bullets, they all blurred into a single pulse of adrenaline. Her hands moved automatically, treating the wound as Rodriguez provided suppressive fire. "Hold still," she commanded firmly, her voice cutting through the chaos. The injured soldier's eyes were wide with terror, but he obeyed. She tore fabric from her field kit, pressing against the wound to stop the bleeding, heart hammering. Nearby, another soldier shouted, gesturing toward a burning vehicle, flames licking its metal frame. Sarah's gaze flicked instinctively, too. The rooftop sniper positions were a constant threat, and she adjusted her angle, moving the injured man out of potential line of fire. The convoy's trucks maneuvered to create a defensive perimeter, engines roaring as soldiers coordinated movements in a choreography of survival. Sarah noticed flashes of movement on a distant roof, a glint that could only mean one thing: the sniper. Her stomach twisted, a mixture of fear and determination tightening around her chest. Yet she didn't falter. Every step was deliberate, every motion precise. Lives depended on it. Not just her own, but the soldiers around her, the civilians. They were sworn to protect. Time became elastic, stretching each second into a tiny eternity. Sarah treated wounds, guided soldiers to cover, and scanned constantly for the enemy. Explosions rocked the street, sending bricks and debris flying. Smoke stung her eyes, and sweat poured down her temples, but she pushed through. She had been trained for chaos, but nothing in training could replicate the sheer, crushing immediacy of combat. Each decision carried consequences. Hesitate, and someone could die. Act too quickly, and mistakes could be fatal. Amid the confusion, she spotted a small child pressed against a wall, wide-eyed and trembling. Instinct overrode fear. She ducked, low, moving toward him, careful to stay behind cover. "It's okay," she whispered. "You're safe now." The boy clung to her arm, trembling, as she guided him toward a truck, ignoring the gunfire slicing through the air. Her heart raced, but her hands remained steady. Training, adrenaline, and sheer willpower merged into a single focus: save lives. Rodriguez covered her movements, issuing commands with a calm authority that belied the chaos. "Carter, head back." "Get out of the open," he barked. She shook her head, eyes fixed on the child. "I'm not leaving him." She shouted over. The din. The commanding officer appeared, face grim, voice edged with urgency. "Lieutenant, this isn't a drill. We can't risk more lives." Sarah's gaze didn't waver. Duty, morality, and instinct collided. She would not abandon a child. She would not abandon those who depended on her. Bullets whizzed past, ricocheting off metal and stone, and the sniper's presence became undeniable. Every motion seemed anticipated, every step measured. Sarah realized that the enemy was not just attacking, they were studying her. Waiting. Testing. She felt a cold shiver, the sense of being watched, measured, hunted. Yet within that fear, a strange clarity emerged. Survival required composure, precision, and courage. She had it. She would not falter. Minutes, or was it hours? Later. Reinforcements arrived, vehicles roaring through dust clouds, bringing much-needed firepower to suppress the enemy. The ambush slowed, giving Sarah and the squad a chance to regroup and extract the wounded. Her hands were coated in dirt, sweat, and blood, but her focus remained razor-sharp. Every soldier she guided to safety reinforced her belief. Courage was contagious, and leadership was measured by action under fire. As the convoy limped back toward the base, Sarah allowed herself a brief glance at the horizon. Smoke still rose from the village, punctuating the chaos of war, while distant gunfire echoed faintly. The sniper had withdrawn, or perhaps merely observed, biding time. Either way, the message was clear. Someone had been tracking her, assessing her, and waiting for a moment to strike. The thought sent a chill down her spine, yet it also hardened her resolve. At the base, medics rushed forward, assessing injuries with practiced efficiency. Sarah moved with them, providing triage and guidance, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Each life saved felt like a small victory, a tangible proof of purpose amidst the destruction. She was exhausted, body trembling from exertion, but her mind remained alert. Reflection had to wait. Tomorrow, the battlefield would demand even more. Captain Lewis approached, his face a mixture of concern and respect. "Carter, I've seen rookies crumble under fire. You didn't. You acted decisively, without hesitation. That's why you're still here." Sarah nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. She had survived. She had protected lives. Yet the weight of responsibility pressed on her shoulders. She realized that courage was not a momentary spark. It was endurance, repeated, relentless, under fire. As night fell, she cleaned her kit and reviewed her notes, the day's chaos replaying in her mind. Every sound, every shadow, every flicker of movement became a lesson. She had seen the true face of combat, unpredictable, brutal, and merciless. Yet she had also witnessed heroism in herself, in her squad, and even in the civilians whose lives she had touched. And somewhere beyond the perimeter, unseen but ever present, the sniper watched. His earlier inquiry echoed in her mind. Is she still alive? Today, she had answered that question with action, with courage, with survival. But tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, and new tests of resolve. She understood that. This was only the beginning. The battlefield had judged her, and she had passed, but the war was far from over. Lieutenant Sarah Carter sat on her cot, exhaustion pressing against her, eyes fixed on the dim glow of the base lights. She reflected on the morning, the chaos, the fear, the lives saved, and the relentless weight of responsibility. She had faced her first true ambush and survived. She had proven herself, not just a medic, but a leader, a protector, a force to be reckoned with. And as sleep finally claimed her, her mind remained alert, knowing that tomorrow the danger would rise again, and she would face it with unwavering determination. The base was quiet that evening, deceptively calm after the chaos of the morning ambush. The sun had dipped below the jagged horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and fiery oranges, casting long shadows over the sand-dusted compound. Lieutenant. Sarah Carter sat in her bunk, reviewing her gear, notes, and the day's events, but her mind refused to settle. The image of the glinting scope from the rooftop haunted her, flickering behind her eyelids every time she closed her eyes. Somewhere, out there, unseen, someone had been observing her every move. She ran through the morning's events in her head, the convoy, the overturned crates, the child, the injured soldier, and realized something unsettling. The ambush had not been random. Every detail, every movement of the enemy seemed too deliberate, too precise. They had studied the squad's routines, mapped their positions, and waited patiently for an opening. And within that orchestration, Sarah knew one fact that gnawed at her. The sniper had been focusing on her, not the squad, not the trucks. Her. The thought made her stomach tighten. Rodriguez had noticed her unease earlier, pausing mid-sentence, as if sensing the silent weight pressing down on her. "You're thinking too much," he had said lightly, though his tone was tinged with concern. "But maybe you're right. Someone is tracking us." Sarah had nodded, forcing a small smile, but the truth settled deep within her chest like a stone. This was no ordinary enemy. This sniper was patient, meticulous, and curious, almost calculating. Her musings were interrupted by the crackle of the base's radio system. The voice that came through was broken, clipped, foreign, but distinctly clear. "Is she still alive?" The words were strange, almost theatrical in their cadence, but unmistakable. Sarah froze. The sniper. He had made contact, not with bullets, not with a message sent to the command center, but directly, intentionally. The question was simple, yet laden with menace. It was not just inquiry. It was a challenge, a test. Captain Lewis appeared seconds later, drawn by the radio chatter. His eyes, normally composed, flickered with concern as he glanced at Sarah. "Lieutenant, did you hear that?" His voice was low, careful, but urgent. "The sniper, he's aware of you. And this question, it's directed at you. He wants to know if you survived the morning." Sarah's throat tightened. She swallowed hard, heart hammering. "I heard it," she whispered. "He's targeting me." Lewis nodded slowly. "I was going to rotate you out. The squad's opinion is unanimous. It's too dangerous to leave you in direct line of sight. But I see what I saw this morning. You're calm under fire. You act decisively. You survive. This sniper doesn't just want to kill you. He's curious. He wants a game." The words left an uncomfortable taste in Sarah's mouth. Survival wasn't a game. Yet somewhere in the perverse logic of the battlefield, it often was. Sarah sat silently, processing the weight of the revelation. She had been almost sent home, pulled out for her own safety, but something instinct, courage, perhaps stubbornness kept her from accepting it. "I'm not going," she said finally, voice steady. "I belong out there. My place is with the squad, with the people we protect. If he wants a game, I'll play, but I'm not stepping back." Her determination seemed to ripple through the room, resonating with the few officers nearby. They nodded subtly, admiration and worry coexisting in their eyes. Night fell fully over the base, the inky black sky pierced only by scattered lamps and distant fires. Sarah's squad moved cautiously through the compound, securing perimeters, checking supplies, and reinforcing barricades. Every shadow seemed a threat, every sound a possible signal of an approaching enemy. Sleep was impossible. Her mind raced through every angle, every possible movement of the sniper, every way to safeguard herself and the squad. She reviewed escape routes, potential blind spots, and sniper vantage points in her mental map. Preparation was her only weapon against uncertainty. The next morning, a reconnaissance team brought back intel confirming her fears. Reports indicated a sniper had been tracking her squad for days, observing patterns, studying routines, and even noting her personal movements within the unit. It wasn't a casual observer. It was methodical, intelligent, patient. Somewhere in the ruins of a distant village, or perched on a rocky ridge, the sniper had singled her out. The knowledge that she was personally targeted added a weight to every decision she would make in the coming days. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she suited up for patrol, her gear feeling heavier than usual. Rodriguez noticed, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're ready for this," he said simply. "You've survived worse. Remember that." She nodded, absorbing his words, but internally wrestling with the mixture of fear, responsibility, and anticipation. Every step she took now carried a double weight, the mission itself and the knowledge that the enemy's eyes were trained squarely on her. As they moved through the arid landscape, the air seemed thicker, heavier, charged with tension. Sarah's squad maintained strict formation, but every instinct told her to scan more, to anticipate, to expect the unexpected. Dust rose around them, sunlight glinting off rocks and debris, each glimmer a potential threat. She noticed subtle signs, shifted pebbles, displaced dirt, a shadow lingering too long. The sniper's presence was intangible yet palpable, like a cold hand resting on her shoulder. During a brief pause, Sarah crouched behind a boulder, checking her supplies and observing the landscape. She felt the sniper's gaze as though it were physical, measuring, testing her resolve. She whispered to herself, voice barely audible, "I am alive. I am ready. You will not break me." Her words were affirmation, prayer, and challenge all at once. This silent duel with an invisible enemy had become a test of endurance, focus, and courage. Hours passed. The squad navigated through villages, dirt paths, and dry riverbeds, every corner a potential trap. Sarah treated minor injuries, guided soldiers through tricky terrain, and remained alert for the faintest sign of danger. The sniper's presence was never overt, yet it influenced every movement. It was psychological warfare, subtle but effective. Sarah felt the weight of unseen observation, a tension that sharpened her instincts to near superhuman levels. At midday, as they approached a small outpost, Sarah paused to check the condition of a wounded civilian caught in crossfire. She knelt in the dirt, wrapping bandages around a deep gash on his arm, ignoring shouts from the squad to move faster. The sniper's influence lingered, a ghostly pressure. Her eyes flicked toward every potential vantage point, assessing rooftops, ridges, and high windows. Somewhere, unseen, he was watching. And somewhere, she knew, he had already made his judgment. When the squad finally returned to the base, the gravity of the sniper's attention weighed on everyone. Officers debated rotations, security measures, and potential counter-sniper tactics. Sarah cleaned her gear methodically, each motion precise, deliberate, a ritual to maintain control amidst chaos. She felt both exhausted and alive, aware that her life had been observed and evaluated. The question lingered in her mind. Is she still alive? The answer, she realized, was not just about survival. It was about proving that courage, determination, and resolve could withstand scrutiny, fear, and death itself. Later that night, as she sat alone under dim lights, Sarah contemplated the odd respect embedded in the sniper's question. There was menace, certainly, but also recognition. Someone had noticed her resilience, her skill, and her willingness to act under pressure. The thought was unsettling, yet strangely empowering. She understood now that survival was not only about avoiding bullets, it was about maintaining composure, thinking clearly, and asserting presence, even when unseen. Forces sought to unsettle her. Sarah's resolve hardened. Tomorrow, the battlefield would test her again. The sniper's gaze would follow, but she would remain vigilant, calm, and decisive. She had survived, proved her capability, and gained insight into her own limits. And as sleep finally claimed her, she whispered a vow. She would not falter, she would not retreat, and she would face the unseen threat with unwavering courage. The sun had barely climbed above the horizon when Lieutenant Sarah Carter strapped on her gear, every strap and buckle clicking into place with precise, practiced motions. The events of the past days, the ambush, the sniper's invisible presence, the civilians she had saved, had left a lingering tension in her chest, a tight coil of vigilance she could not unwind. Every patrol now carried the weight of survival, the responsibility of protecting others, and the knowledge that unseen eyes were following her movements. Even a routine supply run felt like threading a needle through chaos. Her squad moved silently through the rugged terrain, boots crunching over gravel and sand, eyes scanning rooftops, distant ridges, and alleys. Sarah's pulse thrummed like a drum, each beat a reminder that danger could erupt at any second. A flicker of movement near a crumbling wall made her pause, rifle raised. She observed, calculating, too subtle to be wildlife, too deliberate to be casual human motion. Somewhere, the sniper was present, testing her nerves, measuring her patience. She swallowed the lump of fear, channeling it into calm precision. The first real test came within minutes. A sudden explosion shook the dirt road ahead, sending a cloud of dust, rocks, and shrapnel into the air. One of the younger soldiers screamed, staggering backward as a small fragment grazed his shoulder. Sarah's hands moved automatically, checking him and applying pressure to the wound. "Stay calm," she instructed firmly. "You're fine. Just hold still." Her voice cut through panic like steel, steadying both him and herself. Each second mattered. Hesitation could cost lives. As the squad regrouped, Sarah noticed another threat. The roof of a nearby building had collapsed partially, sending unstable debris teetering above their path. Without hesitation, she directed 2 soldiers to secure the area, signaling others to maintain perimeter cover. Every movement was deliberate, every command precise. The sniper's invisible gaze seemed to measure her, testing her reactions under pressure. Sarah's body hummed with awareness, instinct and training converging. She wasn't just surviving. She was asserting control amidst chaos. Minutes later, another close call erupted. A grenade detonated in the distance, sending shockwaves that rattled loose stones around their feet. Sarah felt the vibration through the soles of her boots, and the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. The squad instinctively dove for cover, and Sarah followed, shielding a civilian caught in the crossfire. Smoke and dust choked her lungs, but her hands worked quickly, checking for injuries, stabilizing the man with steady reassurance. She realized that courage was more than action. It was the ability to remain calm when death seemed imminent. The sniper's influence became increasingly evident. Every movement she made, every pause, every step seemed anticipated. The psychological weight of being observed was constant, a silent pressure that could have broken anyone else. Yet Sarah adapted, weaving instinct, training, and intuition into each decision. Her eyes scanned potential vantage points, identifying patterns in the enemy's likely positions. She moved with precision, stepping lightly, ducking behind natural cover, and ensuring civilians and soldiers alike remained safe. Her efforts did not go unnoticed. Fellow soldiers began whispering her new nickname, Ghost. They marveled at her uncanny ability to avoid harm while performing tasks that would have overwhelmed even the most seasoned veterans. She treated injured civilians with unwavering focus, guided squad members with calm authority, and maneuvered through hazardous terrain without hesitation. Fear was present, certainly, but it sharpened rather than paralyzed her. Each narrow escape, each life saved, built her reputation and strengthened the morale of those around her. At midday, the squad paused near a dried riverbed. Sarah took the opportunity to inspect supplies and check medical kits, her hands moving methodically, even as her mind raced. Every sound, the clatter of loose stones, the whisper of wind through the canyon, the distant murmur of villagers, catalogued and analyzed. She felt the sniper's presence like a phantom weight, testing her composure. But she refused to give in to fear. Instead, she leaned into it, using it to heighten her awareness and reinforce her vigilance. Later, as they navigated a narrow passageway between two buildings, another near-fatal moment arrived unexpectedly. A sudden collapse of a loose rooftop sent bricks crashing toward the squad. Instinct and training fused in Sarah's movements. She lunged forward, shouting commands while shielding two soldiers directly beneath the debris. Her hands grabbed the heavier pieces of rubble, shifting them just enough to prevent serious injury. The soldiers scrambled out from the precarious shadows, awed by her quick thinking and precision. Even in danger, she acted decisively, refusing to let panic dictate outcomes. The day's final challenge arrived during a routine inspection of a small village. A stray flare, likely set off by enemy scouts, ignited a storage shed near the edge of town. Flames roared, threatening nearby homes. Sarah directed both soldiers and civilians away from the blaze, using her calm authority to orchestrate evacuation and containment. Her eyes constantly scanned the horizon for signs of the sniper. Every moment carried risk. Every action could be deadly. Yet she moved with unwavering resolve, refusing to let fear dictate her choices. By the time the squad returned to the base, exhaustion pressed against Sarah's limbs like lead. Her uniform was torn in places. Sweat and dust coated her skin, and her hands trembled from adrenaline and fatigue. Yet her mind remained alert, replaying each incident, analyzing each decision, cataloging lessons learned. The sniper's ghostly presence, though unseen, had been a constant reminder that survival required more than skill. It required courage, focus, and relentless determination. Captain Lewis approached her as she began cleaning her gear. His expression reflected both concern and admiration. "Carter," he said, voice steady, "I've seen rookies falter under pressure. You didn't. You've turned what could have been disaster into survival. That's why you're still here. That's why your squad trusts you." Sarah nodded, a mixture of pride, exhaustion, and lingering fear swirling in her chest. She had survived. She had proven herself. And yet, she knew this was only the beginning. That night, alone in her bunk, Sarah reflected on the day's events. Every close call had tested not just her physical abilities, but her mental resilience. The sniper's unseen observation, the near-death experiences, the constant threat to life, all of it had shaped her into someone more alert, more decisive, and more courageous than she had been when she first arrived. Survival was no longer just a goal. It had become a responsibility. Sarah's thoughts turned to the civilians she had helped. Each life saved reinforced her sense of purpose. Every soldier who survived the day carried her influence, her guidance, and her calm determination as a testament to what courage could achieve under fire. She understood now that leadership wasn't about rank or orders. It was about presence, clarity, and the ability to act decisively when every second mattered. As she finally lay down, exhaustion pressing against her body, she allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. Fear had been a constant companion, yet it had sharpened rather than diminished her. She had navigated ambushes, explosions, and life-threatening chaos while maintaining composure and authority. She had survived, and in doing so, she had inspired those around her. And somewhere, watching from the shadows, the sniper observed. His presence was a constant reminder of danger, but it also marked a silent acknowledgement. Sarah Carter was no ordinary soldier. She had survived his scrutiny, evaded his traps, and faced near death repeatedly without faltering. In the quiet of the night, she understood a simple truth. Courage was contagious, and even in the face of relentless threat, she would continue to prove her resilience. The air was still and heavy that morning, almost unnaturally quiet. Lieutenant Sarah Carter moved with her squad through a narrow valley, the jagged cliffs on either side casting long, sharp shadows across the dusty terrain. Her eyes constantly scanned rooftops, ridges, and exposed ledges. Every sense was heightened. The creak of a hinge, the flutter of a cloth in the wind, the faint ripple of dust on a distant road could signal danger. Somewhere out there, the sniper was watching. She could feel it, a pressure that pressed down on her spine and sharpened every nerve. The previous close calls, the ambush, and the invisible threat of the sniper had left an indelible mark. Every step she took now was deliberate, calculated, and precise. Sweat prickled at her temple as she adjusted her helmet and tightened her gloves. Rodriguez rode beside her, glancing at her occasionally. "Eyes sharp," he said quietly, almost reverently. "This one. It's different." Sarah's lips tightened into a small nod. She didn't need to speak. Instinctively, both understood the presence they faced. The squad reached a small ridge overlooking a cluster of buildings. Sarah crouched behind a rock, scanning the terrain below. From this vantage point, she noticed subtle movements. A curtain swaying unnaturally, a glint of metal reflecting the sun, a shadow that lingered. Just a moment too long. The sniper was calculating, patient, and intelligent. Unlike random attackers or inexperienced gunmen, this one had strategy, timing, and focus. And somehow, Sarah realized, he had chosen her as his measure of skill. Minutes stretched into an agonizing rhythm. Each rustle of wind, each creak of shifting gravel, felt magnified. Her hands twitched near her rifle, but remained steady, ready. Her mind raced, cataloging possible positions for the sniper, assessing escape routes, and calculating angles of engagement. Rodriguez whispered, "You feel it too, right?" Sarah nodded slightly, eyes never leaving the landscape. "He's not just hunting us, he's studying us, watching you." The realization brought a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. The sniper wasn't merely a threat. He was a shadow judge, observing her responses, measuring her courage, and testing her instincts. Sarah could almost imagine the cold, calculating eyes behind the scope, analyzing her every twitch, every decision, every moment of hesitation. Yet instead of paralysis, a steely focus surged within her. She had survived ambushes, explosions, and near-death experiences before. She could survive this too. Hours passed with a tense rhythm of motion and observation. The squad cleared buildings, secured civilians, and avoided obvious choke points. Every moment was calculated, deliberate. The sniper remained unseen but present, a specter of danger that forced heightened awareness. Sarah noticed how her instincts sharpened, how her focus deepened, how small details, the tilt of a window, the dust on a ledge, the shifting of a Shadow became vital clues. She moved almost invisibly, silent and precise, her presence commanding the trust of her squad. As the day stretched on, an unspoken tension hung over the valley. Then, in a subtle moment that could have gone unnoticed by any less alert observer, Sarah caught a flash on a ridge. Her breath hitched slightly, but her hands were steady. A faint mark in the dirt suggested a sniper's presence, proof that the unseen adversary was not only observing but evaluating her every action. She stayed calm, signaling the squad to maintain formation while carefully adjusting their movement path. Rodriguez glanced at her, eyes reflecting quiet awe. "You're moving like a shadow," he whispered. "He's watching, and he doesn't even know what to make of it." Sarah's lips pressed into a thin line. Shadow. That word rang true. She wasn't just surviving. She was moving deliberately, purposefully, with precision honed by experience and instinct. Every life saved, every step measured, every order given strengthened her presence. The sniper's silent observation had become a crucible, sharpening her resolve. Later, as the squad paused to assess a wounded civilian, Sarah crouched beside him, applying bandages with calm precision. Her gaze swept the horizon, never still, noting potential vantage points and escape routes. Somewhere, high above or far beyond, the sniper watched. She imagined his eyes on her, measuring her, considering her courage and skill. Fear was still there, prickling at her mind and body, but it had transformed into focus, into clarity, into a strange, almost mutual recognition. By midday, Sarah's awareness had become almost instinctual. She sensed subtle shifts in the wind, minute movements in the terrain, and even the faint ripple of distant dust clouds. Every decision was deliberate, every action precise. Her squad relied on her, followed her instinctively, and drew courage from her calm authority. They did not speak of the sniper. His presence was understood, acknowledged silently. He had become a shadow mentor of sorts, testing her without engagement, forcing her to elevate every action and decision. When the squad finally reached the sea, outskirts of the village, Sarah noticed a lone figure on a distant ridge. She could not be certain, but her intuition screamed the sniper was observing, not attacking yet, just evaluating. Her pulse quickened not with panic, but with recognition of the challenge. She was being measured, assessed, and in that silent contest, she realized something profound. The sniper, though an enemy, had an unspoken respect for her resilience and composure under pressure. The remainder of the mission unfolded in tense precision. Every step, every interaction, and every maneuver was calculated with care. Civilians were guided to safety, injuries treated with meticulous skill, and threats neutralized or avoided. The squad moved with a rhythm born of trust and observation, their cohesion strengthened by Sarah's calm and deliberate leadership. The sniper's presence, once an invisible menace, had become a crucible refining her skills and determination. By the time the squad returned to the base, exhaustion pressed against every muscle. Yet a strange clarity lingered in Sarah's mind. The sniper had tested her in silence, measured her under fire, and left her alive, not as a victim, but as a participant in a deadly dialogue of respect and acknowledgement. Captain Lewis approached her, noting the wear on her uniform and the sharpness in her eyes. "Carter," he said softly, "you've survived not just the battlefield, but the attention of someone extraordinary. They watch, they measure, and yet you've endured." Sarah nodded, a mixture of pride, fatigue, and realization settling over her. She had survived again, but more importantly, she had transformed. Fear had not broken her. It had sharpened her focus, strengthened her decision-making, and elevated her courage. The sniper's presence, though still unseen, had become a force pushing her beyond the limits of ordinary soldiers. She understood now that survival was not merely escaping. Danger, It was mastering it, controlling it, and using it to define one's own strength. That night, Sarah sat alone under the dim glow of her cot's lamp, reflecting on the day. Every step, every action, every split-second decision had been observed. Somewhere, a sniper had recognized her capability, her courage, and her will to survive. And in that acknowledgement, however indirect, she found a strange kind of validation. She was no longer just a lieutenant or a medic. She was a survivor, a leader, a measured adversary in the eyes of one of the most patient and dangerous enemies she had faced. Her resolve solidified. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, and new tests of endurance. But she knew this. The sniper's silent respect was earned, not given. She had faced death, chaos, and the unknown, and emerged not just unbroken, but stronger, sharper, and more capable. The battlefield had judged her, and she had passed. And somewhere, beyond the ridge, hidden but present, the sniper watched. His earlier message echoed faintly in her mind. Is she still alive? Sarah smiled faintly, whispering to herself, voice firm with conviction. Yes, and I will remain so, no matter what comes next. The early morning sky was streaked with muted shades of orange and gray as Lieutenant Sarah Carter readied her squad for the mission. Intelligence had reported that a group of civilians, caught between warring factions, had been trapped in a nearby village under sniper surveillance. The report was chilling. The enemy sniper, the same one who had tested her patience and resolve for days, was believed to be observing the area. He was calculating, meticulous, and deadly. Every step Sarah and her team took would be under his watchful eye. Her squad moved in tight formation as they approached the village, each member tense but disciplined. Sarah crouched low behind a ridge, eyes sweeping over the dusty streets, rooftops, and open courtyards. Her mind catalogued every potential threat, every line of fire, every possible vantage point for the sniper. She knew that one wrong movement could trigger chaos, yet hesitation could cost lives. The trapped civilians were counting on her, and she could not allow fear to govern her actions. As they moved closer, Sarah signaled her squad to split into pairs, covering different angles while she took the lead with Rodriguez. The streets were eerily quiet, the faint sound of the wind mingling with distant, muffled cries. Dust swirled around them, creating natural cover, but also obscuring potential dangers. Every door, window, and alleyway could conceal a threat. Sarah's pulse thrummed in her ears, but her movements remained deliberate, precise. Her training and instinct fused into a single, unwavering focus. Protect life, neutralize danger, survive. The first obstacle appeared almost immediately. A building partially collapsed in the middle of the street, blocking their path. Sarah crouched behind rubble, assessing the situation. We'll need to flank, she instructed, pointing to a narrow alley on the right. Rodriguez and two soldiers moved swiftly to cover her maneuver. Each step was calculated, each movement deliberate. The sniper's presence was palpable, a ghostly hand pressing against the back of her mind, but she refused to let it dominate her. As they advanced through the alley, a sudden shot rang out, ricocheting off stone. Dust exploded around them, forcing the squad to dive for cover. Sarah's heart jumped, adrenaline surging. Suppressing fire, she shouted, pointing to Rodriguez and two other soldiers. They returned fire toward the general direction of the shot, keeping the sniper's attention divided. She scanned rooftops, debris, and windows, trying to pinpoint the exact location, but the enemy remained unseen, a phantom among the ruins. Despite the threat, Sarah moved toward the cries of the civilians. Her squad followed her lead, covering her flanks as she navigated the treacherous terrain. She spotted a small courtyard where several children huddled with frightened adults. Their eyes widened at the sight of the soldiers, but relief flashed across their faces when Sarah approached. "We're here to get you out," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Follow me exactly, and you'll be safe." The extraction was delicate. Each civilian had to be moved carefully while maintaining cover from the sniper's vantage points. Sarah guided them toward the safest path, signaling squad members to take point, suppress potential threats, and monitor escape routes. Bullets whistled past, ricocheting off walls and metal, but she refused to panic. Every second counted, and every decision had to be precise. Her calm authority gave the civilians courage, while her tactical planning ensured their protection. Halfway through the rescue, a more immediate threat emerged. A group of armed men appeared on the rooftops, attempting to block the escape route. The sniper's influence was evident in their positioning. He had likely coordinated this ambush. Sarah's mind raced. "Split! Take the left flank! Cover the civilians!" She shouted. Her squad responded instantly, moving with coordination and discipline, creating a moving shield around the evacuees. Bullets slammed into walls, but Sarah kept her focus, guiding the civilians with unwavering clarity. Rodriguez leaned toward her, shouting over the gunfire. "Carter, we need a distraction to cover the last stretch." Without hesitation, Sarah nodded. She motioned to two soldiers to advance on the rooftops, drawing enemy attention, while she stayed with the civilians. Every step was tense, every movement crucial. The sniper's unseen eyes were everywhere, testing, observing, evaluating. Sarah's pulse was steady, her decisions precise. Fear existed, but it had transformed into control, strategy, and determination. Finally, the group reached the outer perimeter of the village, where armored vehicles waited for extraction. The civilians were exhausted, terrified, but alive. Sarah coordinated their movement into the vehicles, ensuring every last person was accounted for. She remained vigilant, scanning rooftops, ridges, and windows for the sniper's next move. One misstep could still cost lives. Her heart pounded, but her hands were steady. Every decision, every instruction, every motion was deliberate, measured, and life-saving. The extraction vehicles moved out under covering fire, but the sniper was not finished. A sudden shot shattered a window on the lead truck. Sarah's reflexes were immediate. She ducked, pulling the nearest civilian down and signaling her squad to maintain suppressive fire. The vehicle shuddered under the impact, but she kept her composure, guiding the group safely out of immediate danger. The sniper's unseen presence remained a constant, but Sarah's calm, strategic actions neutralized his influence. As the convoy reached the safety of a ridge outside the village, Sarah finally allowed herself a brief moment to breathe. The civilians were safe, the squad intact, and the sniper's attacks had been managed through precision, strategy, and courage. Rodriguez clapped her on the shoulder. "You did it, Carter. You saved them all." She nodded, exhaustion and relief mingling. Yet deep down, she knew the sniper was still out there, still observing, still measuring her resilience and skill. That evening, back at the base, Sarah cleaned her gear meticulously, hands shaking slightly from adrenaline and fatigue. "Captain." Lewis approached, his expression a mix of admiration and concern. "Carter," he said quietly, "I've never seen anyone execute a rescue under sniper fire like that. You didn't just survive, you led, protected, and inspired." Sarah nodded, acknowledging the praise, but her mind was elsewhere. She thought of the sniper, his invisible gaze, and the silent acknowledgement of her skill that came with every encounter. Sleep was impossible. Sarah lay on her cot, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the mission. Each bullet, each maneuver, each life saved was etched vividly in her memory. The sniper's presence lingered, almost a shadow companion, a test she had survived with precision and courage. She realized something profound. The battlefield was not only about physical survival, but about strategy, calm under pressure, and psychological resilience. As night fell, Sarah whispered a quiet vow to herself. She would continue to protect lives, lead her squad, and confront the sniper if necessary. She would not falter, she would not retreat, and she would meet every challenge with unwavering resolve. Somewhere beyond the ridges, the sniper observed, measuring her, considering her skill. For the first time, Sarah felt a strange sense of mutual respect forming, unspoken but undeniable. She understood now that courage was not merely surviving bullets. It was mastering fear, controlling chaos, and leading others through it. Each mission, each close call, each rescue honed her, sharpened her, and built the unshakable resolve that would define her in the days to come. And though the sniper had not revealed himself directly, she knew that he had acknowledged her skill, her courage, and her indomitable will. The night air was cool against her skin as she finally closed her eyes, exhaustion pressing down on her. But even in sleep, her mind remained alert, reviewing tactics, anticipating threats, and preparing for the next encounter. She had faced deadly opposition, guided her squad to success, and saved lives under fire. And somewhere, the sniper's shadow lingered, a silent testament to the dangerous respect she had earned. The early morning sun cast long, sharp shadows across the arid landscape as Lieutenant Sarah Carter prepared for what she knew could be the most dangerous mission yet. Intelligence had tracked the sniper to a ruined village several miles beyond their current position. Every previous encounter, every ambush, every near-death experience had led to this moment. Sarah's jaw was set, her mind sharpened to a razor's edge. She had survived explosions, ambushes, and psychological warfare. Now she would face the source of it all, the sniper who had haunted her steps, observed her courage, and in some strange way respected her. Her squad moved in formation, silent and disciplined, every soldier aware of the stakes. Sarah took point, eyes scanning rooftops, ridges, and rubble-strewn streets. Each movement was deliberate. She could almost feel the sniper's gaze as they approached the village, calculating and precise. Fear was present, but it was focused, controlled, and converted into strategy. Her heart pounded, but her hands remained steady, her mind clear. She knew every step, every choice, could be the difference between life and death for herself, her squad, and the civilians they had sworn to protect. As they entered the village, the destruction was evident. Walls crumbled, doors hung on broken hinges, and dust hung thick in the air. Sarah's squad moved carefully, using natural cover, scanning every potential vantage point. The sniper was there, hidden but present, waiting for a moment to test her resolve. She paused behind a shattered wall, gesturing for her squad to spread out and cover all exits. Her eyes flicked to every high window, every roofline, every shadow. Patience would be their ally, but so would decisiveness. The first shot came almost immediately. Bullets ripped through the air, striking metal and stone, forcing the squad to dive for cover. Sarah's heart jumped, but her mind remained calm. Suppressing fire, focus on the angles, she commanded, pointing to two soldiers on a ridge. They returned fire, keeping the sniper's attention divided, while Sarah led the civilians to safer cover. Every decision was a balance of aggression and caution. The sniper was testing her, but she refused to be tested into fear. As the firefight continued, Sarah noticed subtle movement on a distant rooftop, a shadow flitting between broken beams. She crouched low, scanning for confirmation. There he was, the sniper, finally revealing himself, though still partially concealed. Their eyes seemed to meet across the distance, a silent acknowledgement passing between hunter and hunted. In that instant, Sarah realized that the sniper's fascination with her had been more than tactical. It had been personal. He respected her skill, her courage, and her composure under fire. The squad pressed forward cautiously, with Sarah leading the way. She communicated silently with hand signals, guiding them through rubble and open streets, using every ounce of training and intuition. Bullets whizzed past, dust exploded around them, and the air rang with the echoes of gunfire. Yet Sarah's movements were deliberate, precise, almost dance-like. Every step calculated to protect life while closing in on the sniper. The villagers huddled behind walls, trusting her instinctively, inspired by the calm authority she exuded. Finally, Sarah and her squad reached the central courtyard, where a partially collapsed building gave the sniper his final advantage. She crouched behind a ruined wall, taking in every detail: lines of sight, angles of cover, potential escape. Routes. The sniper's presence was undeniable, the tension almost physical. Then came the challenge she had been waiting for. He fired directly at her position, not to kill, but to provoke, to gauge her reaction. Sarah's training and instinct took over. She ducked low, rolled to the side, and returned precise suppressive fire toward his approximate location. Her squad responded instantly, covering flanks and high angles. The sniper's bullets ricocheted off stone, but she remained calm, her mind focused on survival and tactical advantage. She realized that this was not just a battle, it was a duel. A test of skill, courage, and mental fortitude. Minutes stretched like hours. Every shot fired, every movement, every breath carried weight. The sniper remained elusive, using debris and shadows to mask his position. Sarah's awareness, honed over countless ambushes and close calls, guided her actions. She observed patterns in his firing, calculated his lines of sight, and used feints to draw him out. Each maneuver brought them closer to confrontation, each decision a measure of courage under extreme pressure. Then, a sudden thought struck her. The sniper's respect could be leveraged. He had been testing her, observing her resilience. If she acted decisively but strategically, she could end this stalemate. She signaled Rodriguez and 2 soldiers to flank the building while she approached from a low, covered angle. Her movements were deliberate, calculated to bait the sniper into a vulnerable position. Every step was tense, controlled, precise. The sniper fired again, but Sarah anticipated it, ducking low and rolling behind cover. Her return fire was deliberate, forcing him to shift positions. She moved carefully, inch by inch, closing the distance. The psychological game reached its peak. She could feel his respect, even as bullets whistled past her. Each action, each movement, each calculation was an unspoken conversation between 2 skilled adversaries. She was alive, determined, and unbroken. Finally, Sarah saw him fully exposed on the rooftop, his scope aimed but momentarily distracted. Her squad opened coordinated suppressive fire, forcing him to take cover. She advanced with careful precision, moving through the rubble-strewn courtyard. The sniper's escape routes were limited, his options constrained by the village layout and her tactical planning. Every inch she gained was deliberate, measured, and designed to end the confrontation safely. In a final tense moment, the sniper emerged from cover. For the first time, Sarah could see his eyes, the flicker of recognition, and perhaps a hint of admiration. Without hesitation, she leveled her rifle, aimed, and shouted, "Drop your weapon!" Her voice was steady, firm, commanding. The sniper froze, then slowly raised his hands, acknowledging defeat, not just by force, but by recognition of her skill, courage, and composure. The standoff ended. Sarah approached cautiously, maintaining cover until she was close enough to secure him. Her squad flanked her, ensuring no sudden movements could change the outcome. The sniper, breathing heavily, met her gaze. In that silent exchange, there was understanding. He had tested her, and she had endured. Her resilience, calm, and precision had earned his respect. For the first time, the hunter and the hunted stood as equals in mutual acknowledgement. A mission concluded with the safe evacuation of the civilians and the capture of the sniper. Back at the base, Sarah debriefed her squad, her voice steady but filled with pride. Every life saved, every tactical decision, every narrow escape reinforced her status as a capable leader. The sniper, now under secure custody, offered no hostility, only silent acknowledgement of the woman who had bested him in skill, courage, and resolve. Later, as Sarah cleaned her gear, exhaustion and relief washing over her, Captain Lewis approached. "Carter," he said quietly, "I've seen courage, skill, and leadership, but what you've demonstrated, it's extraordinary. You've survived ambushes, guided your squad, saved lives, and faced the enemy's most patient and dangerous observer, and you've earned respect where many would see only fear. You're remarkable." Sarah nodded, her thoughts reflecting. On the journey, the ambush, the sniper's silent tests, the close calls, and the final confrontation. Every step had been a test of courage, mental fortitude, and leadership. She had survived, and more than that, she had proven that resilience, strategy, and calm decisiveness could overcome even the most daunting threats. As night fell, Sarah looked at the horizon, the base quiet and secure. Somewhere out there, beyond the perimeter, the world was still dangerous, still unpredictable, still unforgiving. But she had faced death, challenge, and judgment, and she had emerged not just alive, but stronger, wiser, and respected by friend and foe alike. She whispered quietly, a vow to herself and the soldiers who looked to her for leadership. "I will survive. I will protect. I will lead, no matter what comes next." And with that, Lieutenant Sarah Carter, the medic, the leader, and the survivor, closed her eyes, ready for whatever the next day would bring, knowing that courage, determination, and skill could carry her through even the darkest trials.